Chapter 31. Captivity Day 29. Samari. The original Samari spent most of her life traveling around the galaxy with Akia. She didn't have anywhere to call home, but for Kayla, Hyrule was home. Since the siege, the planet had changed so much, yet the nostalgia remained. Yari had only seen Hyrule from orbit from inside the loading bay, back when the ship was still called Regicide 1. He was excited about finally seeing the surface. He wanted to see where his mama grew up. He didn't remember his people's homeworld. Children with the genetic condition he shared with his brother only survive if they were born with a knack which allowed them to compensate for their diminished cold tolerance. The few infants who survived were sent into exile. Allowing the birth defect to propagate throughout the population would be catastrophic. Samari understood why they did it, but she didn't like it. "Where do you live, Mama?" Yari asked as the shuttle continued toward the Port Liberty landing area. "The house I grew up in was there, where that pile of rubble over there is. Now I live in that house over there. The one on top of the hill, with the fountain out front," Samari answered. "Can we stay in the big house?" Yari asked excitedly. "We won't be here long," Samari said sadly. "Don't worry, little guy," Oleander said from the pilot's chair. "I called ahead to Lashar. She's going to make sure there's plenty of room on the floor for you to dance." "I like to dance," Yari cheered. His body language betrayed his deep remorse that he'd be the only Zagultum there. "We're cleared for 14, Oleander said. Engaging autodock now. He reached down, flipped a lever, and turned the chair to face the passenger area. Mama's face turned funny color again. Yari laughed mockingly. "I'm not blushing," Samari insisted. "You are now," Oleander teased. Yari clapped. "You're both lucky I don't have my tails," Samari smirked. "The marks on your wrists are almost gone. How are your ankles?" Oleander grinned. "Still bumpy. Most of the redness is gone, but it's still itchy." Samari looked down and blushed even brighter. "I'll contact Akia," Oleander said. "It could be the type of leather those manacles were made from, but I'm willing to bet the allergic reaction was from the brand of leather oil the former owner used." Yari looked confused. "It's just more boring grown-up stuff," Oleander said reassuringly. Sam snickered quietly. The shuttle landed on a lot on the upper deck of the starport. "I've never parked up here," Sam said as Oleander opened the door and ushered them onto the landing pad. There were only 2 other shuttles parked in the area. Her landing craft was by far the smallest. The others looked like luxury models, even to her untrained eyes. Her shuttle was made for convenience, not style. A long cylindrical vessel lined with seating and transparent plasteel windows. She wondered what the owners of the other craft would think of her spacefaring minibus. Would they be embarrassed to be parked near her, or should she be ashamed of her own lack of vanity? "Yari, come on," Oleander scolded. "Stay away from the other ships. They may have automated defense systems." "I'm just looking," Yari complained. "We have a lot to do today," Sam said, took Oleander's hand, and walked with him toward the starport entrance. "We'll leave you up here," Oleander jeered. "Wait for me," Yari roared as he ran after them. It didn't take long for them to make their way to the front counter of the customs area. "Welcome to Hyrule," the girl behind the counter began to say, but was interrupted as Oleander rested one hand on the identity scanner and dropped a credit stick onto the counter. "Enjoy your stay, Mr. Orwell, Defender, and family," the girl said as she pocketed the credit stick. "Don't we have to go through decontamination?" Sam whispered as he led her away from the counter with Yuri plodding merrily behind them. "You're a Samser and with a rash on your ankles and a discoloration on your shoulder from being splashed by Zagultum blood. There was recently a plague on your species' homeworld. I'd rather skip the questions. I have the paperwork, but not the time. If you'd rather go back, that's fine." Oleander grinned. "No, not even a little," Sam giggled. They all walked together down the hallway leading to the old waiting area, past rows of bricked-up faction offices. "I can't help but remember what it was like back when this was still a busy port," Oleander said. "If they rebuilt and reopened trade with the factions, they'd have a thriving economy within 2 or 3 years. That's only a year after the planet is going to be destroyed," Sam smirked. "What?" Oleander said as he stopped dead in his tracks. It's an incomplete memory. My sister Soul knows the details, Sam said. While falling into the great machine on Midguard, she saw it. Our brother shattered this planet after Midguard returned to the Havres system. That's not possible, Oleander said. A soft sound echoed through the large chamber. Click, clack, click. She saw it, Samari said defiantly. Witnessing an event in no way assures you're correctly interpreting it, Oleander said calmly. It's not possible for a single practitioner, regardless of what mystic arts they can access, to shatter a planet. I know her memory of it, Sam insisted. I've seen it. Her voice was louder than she intended. She knew she shouldn't be talking like this around Yari. He was still very young for his species, and she didn't want to upset him needlessly, but Oleander refused to believe her. Is this how he really is? Nothing you say matters once he pulls out? If you'd just listen to what I'm actually telling you, Oleander began with an exaggerated sigh. The noise was steadily growing louder and closer. Click, clack, click. You're being a condescending ass. I've seen it. It's going to happen. While falling into the machine on Midguard, I saw Hyrule appear in the sky above the planet and shatter like glass. My brother did it. I don't know how, but I knew it was him, Sam snapped. Why won't you believe me? Fine, you saw it, Oleander growled, but your cause and effect relation isn't possible. Flawless ritual casting with 100 or more practitioners, you could cause some serious damage, but not shatter a planet. You both jumped to the same conclusion, and that's the problem. The approaching noise stopped. Tell me how you'd explain it, Samari demanded. You're just so determined to be right. Will you just calm down and listen? Oleander bristled. No, Sam snorted. Gravity, coupled with an impact event, a high-pitched, childlike female voice from somewhere beyond where Yari was standing said. If the legends are true, Midgard is orbited by 2 artificial suns. Park a planet and 2 suns next to another world, apply the inverse square law of gravitation, what happens next? Gravitational physics happens, Oleander smirked. Hello, Briar. The woman was obscured completely by Yari's massive bulk. His head was pointing straight up at the ceiling, his arms twitching softly, the fur of either side of his head was moving rapidly. Found it, Briar said triumphantly, as Yari's right foot began bouncing with his heel thumping against the floor. Yuri was making an odd chortling purr sound Sam had never heard before. Samari walked behind him to see what the woman was doing to her son. You're such a cutie, Briar said as she continued to vigorously scratch the part of his neck where his black scales and white fur met. Briar was wearing forest green clothing, a split-leg skirt which separated just below her knees, cloth-wrap gauntlets, and a matching top that bore more resemblance to a bra than armor. Her eyes were a rich amber color. Her stark white skin and neck-length white hair made it obvious at a glance that she was a Lamentic, even if she was a bit short for women of the species. She was roughly 6'3". Her muscle mass was lean, but the definition in her upper arms and stomach was clear. Her breasts and hips were shapely, her face narrow, and her neck slender. Twin swords rested in sheaths on each hip, and a curved-handle pistol was holstered just above her left thigh. Cyanide had learned the twin blade style alongside Briar V. Sean, under the tutelage of Memory Joulet. It was reassuring to know the High Court had sent an old friend of Cyan to meet them at the starport. She withdrew her hands from Yuri's fur and darted around behind him. No, Sam heard Oleander protest loudly, not this time. Samari and Yuri turned to watch Briar chasing Oleander around the room, demanding he let her give him a kiss. You can kiss me, Sam offered. Oleander skidded to a halt. No, that's even worse. Kissing me is worse, Samari pouted. I thought you liked the way I kiss. You know that's not what Oleander's defense was cut short as Briar grabbed onto him and pulled him in for a kiss. Sam watched as his arms twitched and he fought against his base urges. His legs trembled as she slid her tongue into his mouth. His knees nearly buckled, but he managed to catch himself. Still standing, Briar said with exaggerated sorrow. I must be losing my touch. He stood motionless, panting, while she walked back over to Sam and Yuri. Women tend to be better kissers than men, Briar whispered. Without an eligible male, we unperfected get plenty of practice. Can you teach me to do that? Sam asked. I doubt it would work for someone he can be with, Briar admitted. We'll be in the truck, Briar taunted. Oleander, you're welcome to join us once you're able to walk straight. Briar had rented a half-track pickup. She'd been told they'd be accompanied by a Zogultum, but not that it was a juvenile. The vehicle was sturdy enough to accommodate an adult of the species. They got Yuri situated in the back, then sat in the front while waiting for Oleander. I get that you're one of the unperfected, but if they disbanded the program because there aren't any males, would you? With Oleander? Briar laughed. I don't treat him like that because I like him. I'm hoping he slips up so I can have him executed, and he knows it. He first found out I was unperfected after grabbing my ass. I warned him off. He went to Luna to get confirmation. He spoke to the head of House V. Sean to accuse me of lying. I prefer to let my swords do the talking, and there's only one male at the court with the skill to answer. If they ended the program today, I'd duel Ganon today and wake in his bed tomorrow. Swordplay is foreplay, and we've already crossed swords. What's he like? Sam asked. I was warned there was a lot you wouldn't remember, Briar said in shock, but you forgot the head of the fifth house? House Nazgali, right? Samari asked. I at least hope you remember Jewel, Briar said hesitantly. Sorry, Sam said meekly. Well, this is going to be awkward, Briar said. She's an indigo-haired Lampharian with smallish features, dark eyes, rather young-looking. Spark any memories? No, Samari pouted. She helped raise you until you were old enough to travel with Akia and you don't remember her at all, Briar said in shock. Maybe I should have asked House Ryjuk to host you for the operation. Wait, Olivia Ryjuk trained you in gunslinging. Do you remember her? Briar asked. Not at all. I don't remember having skills like that, Sam said emphatically. I'm more Kayla than old Samari. I inherited her body, not her life experiences. I didn't mean to push, Briar said. I'm sure this is stranger for you than any of us. Maybe it would be easier if I'd ever met the prior you. I only know Samari Alaru as a stack of files. Oleander walked out of the building. My last name is Alaru? Sam said in shock. Of course. They're the house that legally adopted you. I doubt they'd object to you changing your name. Your contract with House Alaru ended when Samari died. Ladies, Oleander interrupted as he opened the door. Sam scooted over to the middle seat to give him room to squeeze in. I don't currently have a defender, Oleander winked. Adam is strictly Lamentix, but I could arrange your admission to House Orwell and arrange some great fringe benefits. No, Sam said scornfully as they pulled away from the curb. I didn't expect House V. Sean to be hosting the procedure, Oleander remarked. We're not. You crossed paths with Luna at the last War Council and reminded her why she relies on Malice Ryjuk instead of your services. Briar said. Aisha asked me to step in. Please tell me I'm not being sent to assist House Killen, Oleander grumbled. I'd rather not get in another fist fight with Duat. Another what? Briar asked then burst out laughing. Oleander scowled. Sam looked back and forth between them. Nazgali is hosting, Briar said. They needed to make a last-minute Delula clone and they already had one ready to go. Eolan and Ganon are both fertile, what do they need me for? Oleander asked mockingly. Has their family twig finally run out of branches? He's not so cute when he's in a snit, Briar said as they pulled in front of the old black church spire. It was one of the few buildings that had remained unscathed during the siege. She reached into her bra and pulled out a slender, intricately engraved, ivory cylinder and held it out to him. You should know where to stick it. I'm fine, Oleander grumbled as he took it and handed her a data stick. I'll get Sam set up and pick you up once you're done here, Briar said. At least tell me which of the Nazgali women requires my services, Oleander said irritably. Fury, Briar said in an ominous tone. But she's Dojmare, Oleander objected. They'll make the arrangements to make sure everyone's primed for the impregnation. Briar shrugged. It'll be one and done. Just the tip. That's not how Oleander tried to object. I don't care, and neither do they, Briar scoffed. The pairing was recommended by Inari and personally approved by Dachima. Do your duty as a member of House Adam, or face the consequences. Inari? Oleander said angrily. To think my own daughter would. Get out, Briar snarled. That vault access key will expire if you keep wasting time. They sped away before he could finish closing the door. Yuri cheered happily from the bed of the truck as they spun around in the middle of an intersection and darted off on their way to Alliance Arms. Briar was silent during the brief trip. Sam wondered why Oleander hadn't mentioned anything to her about having an errand to run while they were here. Maybe it would have been better if they hadn't spent the night. I hope you've figured out what he's really after, Briar said as she slowed the car to pull into the lot. We already fulfilled the first Samari's dying wish, if that's what you mean, Sam shrugged. Good luck, Briar said as she pulled in and parked. I'll be waiting in the car. Let me know if you need me. If neither of you are coming in with me, why didn't you drop me here first? Samari asked. There aren't any time constraints on you trying to cash out some tab, Briar said. If you run late, I've been instructed to get the nurse without you. Come on, Yuri, Samari said as she opened the door. Don't forget this, Briar said while holding out the data stick. The pickup lurched to the side as Yuri climbed out of the bed. That might help, Sam said with a blush as she took the storage device from Briar and hopped out of the truck. What kind of place is this? Yuri asked nervously as they approached the front door. They sell things to protect people, Samari said as she pushed the door open. We're here because they're holding something for your mama, and I need it back. Yuri had to turn sideways to step through the door. Samari followed right behind him. It looked like a fairly slow day. The few customers they had looked like they were perusing the inventory. They'd done a little remodeling. They added a row of weapon displays on one of the warehouse-length walls, but otherwise it hadn't changed much. She walked to his side as she heard someone walking toward them. Mama, Yuri giggled as a Gorgalian stopped in front of them. They were clearly trying to size him up. He's little. I'm a girl, the Gorgalian snorted irritably, and you're in my way. Excuse us, Sam said as she led Yuri further away from the door. The woman snorted quietly as she left the store. Can I look at the shinies? Yuri asked while twitching his thumbs and rotating his shoulders from side to side. Look but don't touch, Samari said firmly. Be polite and try to make room for other people. The workers by the front desk weren't paying too much attention to her as she approached. Mama, Yuri said in alarm, they're looking at me funny. Sam's head snapped to the right. A gray-furred female Cheshire was squatting between two armor racks, staring at him. Sam smiled to herself, as she found herself quoting Bruja. Asia, she said in a commanding voice, stop gawking and do your job. The feline shop worker looked startled and confused, then scurried away. Who's hassling our employees? A white Cayman said while storming out of the back room. Kiryu, Samari said with a playful grin, we meet again, little dark one. Who are you? The woman asked in a demanding tone while planting her hand on her right hip, covering the hint of black fur that was visible above her belt. You can call me Queen Rainbow Sunshine Turnip Truck, Sam said forcefully while trying to keep a straight face. The shop workers nearby stopped and stared at the two of them. Kiryu looked baffled momentarily. The corner of one lip curled up into a crooked grin. How about Vicky, instead? No, Sam snickered, too cutesy. Is that really you, Lady DS? Kiryu asked in shock. I've walked away from my old title, Sam smirked, and I told you I didn't like being called that. The stocky Cayman woman rushed around the counter and gave her a big hug. My new body's not as durable, Samari gasped, and needs to breathe. Kiryu let go and took a half step back. I have a million questions, Kiryu said with a toothy smile. Can we talk in my office? I can't stay long, Samari sighed. I just came to pick up that item I have stored in the special vault, cash out my tab, and ask for a personal favor. I can get your box out of storage, but I'd need Bruge's approval to cash out your tab. She's taking the day off for personal reasons, Kiryu said. Sam pouted. Do you really think you can breeze in here and ask for a favor, just like that? Kiryu asked as if making an accusation. Well, if you're not interested in me paying for you to go to Club 9th tonight. Sam taunted. How's that me doing you a favor? Kiryu asked suspiciously. We've made arrangements so my son can go dancing, but he'll need a chaperone. I was hoping you'd be willing to keep an eye on him and keep him from getting bored. I'll cover your bar tab. Since when am I the sort to play auntie to some random pipsqueak? Are you really who you say you are? Kiryu mocked. At least let me introduce you to him, Samari urged. Kiryu rolled her eyes. Yuri, come here, Samari called. I want to introduce you to someone. Yuri pulled his attention away from the weapon display and started plodding over to the counter. Are you serious? Kiryu laughed. Labor must have been a bitch. Now you know why I needed a new body, Sam joked. Yikes, Kiryu chuckled. I left his twin brother back at my stronghold. Twins, Kiryu chided. My people have litters of up to 6. Samari giggled. Wow, you look strong, Kiryu said with a sly grin. Yuri nodded enthusiastically while rolling his shoulders forward. I'm Kiryu, your Cayman godmother, she said with a twinkle in her eye. Your mother was just asking me to keep you entertained tonight, but I'm not sure if I can. We got a really big delivery earlier, and the boxes are so heavy. I don't think we'll be able to get them all moved in time. I'm good at moving boxes, Yuri said proudly. Would you be willing to help us? Kiryu said as if she was a character imparting a quest in some game. I like to help, Yuri smiled, but not as much as I like to dance. Help now, dance later, Kiryu said with a tilt of her head. Okay, he said. She called 2 of the saleswomen to bring him to help them in the warehouse. Kiryu, Samari smirked. He volunteered, she shrugged. Consider this my payment for babysitting. Now follow me to the office, and update me on what's been going on with you over the last few months. I really am on a tight schedule, Sam frowned. I heard you the first time, Kiryu scoffed. As long as you have all the paperwork we need, I can hand over your container and give you access to the Lady Darkseid tab, but I can't just cash it out. I really need my money back, Sam growled. Come with me, Kiryu said as she took Sam by the arm and led her toward the office. Let me talk to you about our return policy. Retrieving the cryogenic storage unit from the special vault took no time at all. Finagling a way for her to get a portion of her money took a while. Kiryu insisted it would have been much easier if Bruja was in, but she'd taken the day off due to stress over the Claytherian force encroaching on Quailani space. Samari couldn't tell Kiryu what was in the container, or about the upcoming Claytherian withdrawal. There were people using varied methods to predict future events, which could make the mere utterance dangerous. Instead, Sam asked Kiryu to make a replacement fox mask for Kali's mask, and offered to pay for a ticket for Bruja to visit her lover while delivering it once the Claytherians moved on in a day or two. When asked why she was so sure they were going to just move on, Samari merely shrugged and said she knew things. This led to a conversation about the relation between Kali and Samari, which confused Kiryu enough that she opted to drop it and move on. One thing was clear, her Cayman friend was upset the mask had been cracked by a bullet that was deflected by the contour of the mask. The replacement was going to be properly armored and billed to her account. Samari began to suspect they had either invested her money or were enjoying collecting the interest on it. The only way for Sam to get back some of her funds today would be to make some purchases and return them immediately for the credits. She suspected that they weren't just holding on to her money. It didn't seem to be readily available. Kiryu's unwillingness to permit her returns to exceed 100 GC reinforced this viewpoint. The purchase cost was 5 gal cred higher than the return amount because of the value of non-returnable power cells, but at least she had enough of her money back to not have to worry about her expenditures for a while. Samari wished she could have talked longer with Kiryu, but at least she'd be able to visit more often. Yuri seemed to be enjoying showing off how strong he was for the shop workers who were doting on him while coercing him to do most of the work in the warehouse. Grudgingly, Sam agreed to meet Kiryu and Yuri at the club. She walked out of Alliance Arms with just 20 minutes to spare before the end of Nelfree's shift. Sam wanted to be there when they picked up Nelfree. She hoped her friend could set her mind to rest before going under the knife. Keeping herself busy only went so far in keeping her from worrying. She had been so determined to be with Oleander before the surgery. She had made sure Kali could call off Claytharia if something went wrong. So many of her actions were aligned with the possibility of something going horribly wrong. It was good to be prepared for the worst, though she couldn't shake the feeling she was forgetting something important. But what? "Where's the kid?" Briar asked as Samari hopped into the pickup. "He's staying to help out in the warehouse," Sam shrugged. "If I knew you were going to do that, I would have stopped by the garage to trade out the pickup for a car. We'll just have to make do. I hope your nurse friend doesn't mind if the cab is a bit cramped. I already planned to make Oleander ride in the back," Briar said while pulling out. "What garage?" Sam asked. "Haven't you been to Cyanide's Hyrule property?" Briar asked. "I've been to her cliffside cave," Samari replied. "Oh, I thought you two were closer," Briar sounded confused. "I borrowed this from her garage. My body had 2 souls in it. Her Tejimere was Kivaza's soul, not mine." "Kivaza?" Briar snickered. "Isn't that fitting? Your second personality was named for personality split." "You're wrong," Sam scoffed. "Veshteka had 2 souls. Kivaza was the soul of her unborn sister which she absorbed in her mother's womb." "Believe what you'd like," Briar smirked, "there's a reason we put down chimeric offspring." Samari decided to remain silent to avoid a pointless argument. Samari stared out the window past Briar at the fractured remains of the founding tree as they neared the end of the street. She looked forward again as they turned right to continue on their way to the hospital. An ambulance was pulling away from the emergency entrance as they pulled up in front of the hospital. As they walked into the building, Sam watched in disgust while watching the hospital staff sorting through the injured. Each arrival's ID chip was scanned to determine their net worth and faction affiliation prior to being triaged. The wealthy were admitted first, followed by faction members based on ranking. Anyone without either the ability to pay or a connection to a group willing to pay for them were denied service. "Briar, do you have a spare clear stone?" Samari asked. "A spare? No. Why?" Briar asked. "Watching this is making me feel sick." "I need to do something," Sam whimpered. "We're here to pick up your nurse friend, nothing more. I have to do this. Just let me save one of them, please." Samari pled. "You need a clear stone for that? It's that or burn some of my own life force," Sam said with a stony glare. "Fine," Briar grumbled, while passing her a faintly glowing white soul stone. "I'll go get your nurse." "Thank you," Samari said appreciatively. "Be careful. That rock's almost depleted," Briar cautioned. One of the people she'd watched them wheel out of the ambulance was a gray-furred felinoid. They looked a little tall to be a Cheshire, but their features were narrower than the average Karzan. They had been set to the side without medical assistance. Samari rested her hand lightly on their chest. There was more give than there should be, and there was no heartbeat. She couldn't imagine anyone hassling her for helping someone the staff had abandoned to die. They were technically already dead, so why not? She repurposed her mystrionic radar sensibility to get a feel for the severity of their injuries. They'd suffered from blunt force trauma to the center of their chest, breaking several ribs, which had punctured their lungs. Not a problem, but she needed to keep their brain alive while repairing their body. She took a moment to activate an ability intended to sustain someone's life until they could get proper medical intervention. She used the energy trapped within the soul stone to maintain the ability. Toggling on her regenerative aura could repair their lungs and mend their ribs, but first she'd have to put everything back where it belonged. She formed 2 small atmospheric bubbles and forced them down the feline's throat, one into each lung, then gently adjusted them to expand their lungs, applying pressure against their damaged ribs. She altered between use of her mystical mending and healing abilities while guiding the regeneration and repair of their ribcage. Several members of the hospital staff tried pestering her while she was working. From her clothing alone it should be obvious she didn't work there, but they just kept asking. She dispelled the atmospheric bubble once their ribs and lungs had been fully restored. The light of the stone had almost gone out completely. She needed to restart their heart before her life-sustaining power expired. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," a burly Lapian orderly said firmly. There was a very angry-looking nurse standing next to him. "I need a defibrillator to finish up," Sam said. The orderly repeated himself, more firmly, and the nurse crossed her arms. "If I haven't gotten what I need before the light in that stone goes out, your lives are forfeit." The nurse took out a handheld communicator and called for security. "Sounds fun," Briar said from somewhere to her right. Sam heard the jingling of the tassels that hung from the hilts of her swords. "What's the situation?" Nelfree said as she ran over to join Samari. "All I have left to do is restart their heart," Sam said urgently, "but they won't bring me a defibrillator." "Have you tried CPR?" Nelfree asked. "I've never done it on a non-Terran," Samari whimpered. "I'll show you," Nelfree said while glaring at the other nurse. "They're my patient now. Just tell the administrators to take the admission fee out of my pay." "Thank you, Nelfree," Sam smiled warmly. "Mouth-to-mouth isn't needed. I'll show you the timing on the chest compression," Nelfree said. "Can either of you two generate energy bolts?" "Of course," Briar snickered. "Good," Nelfree said. "I'll need you over here, too." The injured feline was indeed a pygmy Karzan. He'd been hired to be a guide for a group of hazard tourists. He made a regular practice of only bringing his clients near properties where the residents weren't full-time residents, but the group ignored him and wandered off his planned route through Blade's Edge. One of the brave hunters decided it was a good idea to hide behind their guide after instigating a fight with a far superior opponent. They knew their medical expenses would be covered, and didn't seem to care about their guide. The Karzan was fortunate that the ambulance service was paid by the hospital per person delivered. According to Nelfree, it wasn't uncommon for residents of Blade's Edge to call for ambulances themselves, although Samari suspected they called them trash trucks. The pygmy had some trouble getting his feet under him at first, but after he promised Nelfree he'd get a couple days of rest, they parted ways. "I think we should talk before the surgery," Samari said as they made their way to the truck. "With all due respect," Nelfree said, "you did well back there, but I'm hoping you're not the doctor." Sam glanced over at Briar. "Her clearance level wasn't sufficient to provide any details," Briar said while walking to the driver's side of the vehicle. "Wait, what do you know?" Sam asked Nelfree. "The hospital was paid by a group wishing to lease my services to assist with neural surgery," Nelfree shrugged. "Yeah, we really need to talk," Samari grumbled. "I'll be your patient, and you don't even know who I am." "As long as I have time to familiarize myself with the procedure, that shouldn't matter," Nelfree said in a professional tone. Briar got in the car. "A lot has changed since the last time you saw me," Sam said. "I'm planning on being in this region for a while, and I'd like to rekindle our friendship after the surgery." Nelfree stiffened. "I'm pretty good with faces. Are you sure you haven't mistaken me for someone else?" Sam rested her hand on the door handle and said, "This body is new to me, but we've met. It's complicated. Friend might have been overstating things a little. I didn't have the chance to get to know you as well as I would have liked, but I'd like to pick up where we left off. The night I invited you, Kiryu, and Syntholo to Club 9th was a lot of fun. I had two souls inside of me back then. That's no longer the case. The soul inside me is the one that was active at the time. The other soul is still inside the body you knew, the one with 3 tails that talked with you about that Alorn." "Lady Darkseid?" Nelfree asked in disbelief. "I had to abandon that title," Sam nodded and opened the door, "but yes. I'm just called Samari now, Sam for short." They both slid into the car. Nelfree's slender canine frame left significantly more room in the cab than Oleander had, but she suspected it would have felt far more snug if they hadn't talked first. "I was surprised to run into 2 pygmy Karzan today," Briar remarked as she pulled out of the hospital parking lot. "Carmel is such an impoverished system. They're seldom seen traveling." "The white feline by the elevator was Shashin," Nelfree corrected her. "He said his name was Smith. I've never seen him before. Thanks again for running him off." You looked uncomfortable, Briar said dismissively. Regardless of species, us women need to stick together. Most creepy guys seem completely unaware. That reminds me, I have to pick up Oleander. I guess he'll have to ride in the back. Sam gasped as she realized what she'd been forgetting about all day. The Karzan War of Independence should have just begun. She connected to the Havre's lightwave relay and checked to see if there had been any news posted from Karzan space. There was nothing, unless you knew what to look for. Security had been bolstered near the Starlink in the Volk region. There was a travel advisory about a Cheshire Party fleet near Felair. Formal complaints had been filed concerning a fleet blockading the slipstream entrance at Star. The Lamentic Empire's response was to assert their fleet would remain there until the Pilth Stargate was restored to normal operation. Prior to the T-Tarn conflict, there were 5 empires with enough military might to stand alone against the Lamentic High Court. Of those, only 3 have retained that capability, and Tazcorp wasn't one of them, but Claytharia was. Samari rolled down her window as they pulled in front of the old black church building. Get in back, Briar said, while leaning toward the passenger door. Where's Yuri? Oleander asked. Kiryu needed help at the shop, and he offered. They're both going to meet up with us later at Club 9th, Sam shrugged. What about the surgery? Nelfree asked in bewilderment. Have you ever wondered what's beyond the curtain? Oleander asked with a sly grin. Never mind that, Samari teased. Oleander, while you were in there, did you pick up anything for me at the Black Church gift shop? You'll have to wait, he chuckled, seeing as I'm riding alone in the back. Sam pouted as he climbed into the bed of the truck. Gowroon adjusted the layout of Guise Tassios frequently. She had been looking forward to seeing his recent changes, but when they arrived it was clear that she'd chosen a bad day for a visit. The doors were wide open, and they could see a construction crew hard at work through the front windows. Figures, the one time I was looking forward to checking in with the Meditador, Sam grumbled, and he chooses today to remodel. I'll have to come back another day. It's just as well, Nelfree sighed with relief, I'd rather dress for the occasion. We can get food on site, Briar said. Oleander complained loudly from the back as they did a 3-point turn without any forewarning. Nelfree. The inner ring of the portal spun rapidly, as they traversed a raised walkway through the churning maelstrom of a pocket dimension. She'd studied enough archaeological sites to appreciate the age of the technology. It was incredibly well maintained. The letters engraved on the stationary parts were of Eldorani origin. If she had to guess, it was from the late dynastic era. It was clear the Lamentics didn't quite understand how it worked, and had admitted they couldn't make more. She'd been told anyone not holding onto a Lamentic's hand while passing through would be consumed by the swirling mass. Nelfree held onto Oleander's hand desperately. Considering what had happened during the surgery, she was terrified he was going to just let go and watch her body being slowly torn apart as recompense, but he didn't. Once they were back in the real world, back where they'd started, he led her to the curtain, excused himself and left. She stood staring at the heavy red curtain that led back into the club. The inner ring of the portal spun behind her. The Lamentic woman had ran off the white-furred Shoshan that had cornered her in the elevator. He was passable as a Cheshire, despite being half canine. He left pretty quick, but not before he tried to bribe her to ensure the surgery wasn't successful. He offered her enough money to go wherever she wanted, and claimed to know the whereabouts of the Alorn she'd met years prior. Nelfree's integrity was non-negotiable. She would have told him as much if she had time to do so. She did everything she could, but Samari never woke up after the surgery. If someone looked at the security camera recording from that elevator ride, what would they think? She would never agree to Ernst Smith's offer, but the surgery did fail, and that recording could cost her everything. Her job, her reputation, even her life. Not like that, she muttered as she dragged her attention away from the portal, and followed the curtain to the stairs leading down to the club. Naj Rail. The Naj Rail were not individuals, but splinters of a greater whole which was banished from this realm long ago. The splinter which had followed the new wellspring had perished in their recent battle, but not before sharing all they had learned. They could feel the shifting threads of the great loom. The song of the collective was insufficient to convey the change to come. Long ago the river wild, overgrown all left is mired. In the shadows the tree does sigh, preparing for the day to die. The weaver's dance was slowing, the seeds long planted now were growing. The Xenon had survived the destruction of their colony sites over 30 million years ago. The technologies which sustained their hives had been lost, only maintained by defiling weavers. 3 hives were now known to the Nodge rail, and they would be cut from the fabric of the loom. Tyrell. He'd planned to spend the day coordinating with the Karzon, but Gory had taken off to go looking for Syntholo, leaving the Pygmy tech team stranded. His salvage crew was out there observing, but he couldn't focus on the feed they were transmitting. There was a lot of movement within the nebula. Oleander's command ship had recalled its crew, but remained docked with the array. Something was happening out there, and he didn't like it. The massive tendrils of the creature that was once identifiable as a nautiloid released its hold on the array and started moving away toward the gathering Claytherian swarm. A light on his console began to flash. The transmission was from the LHC, Indulgence. Tyrell speaking, he said as he answered quickly. I just received news, the interim captain said solemnly. There was a problem during the surgery. It looks like those Claytherians already know. We're going to prep weapons. Can you cover our withdrawal? If I have to, I can try, Tyrell said apprehensively. Just do us both a favor and let them make the first move.